resignation, that's happened because of COVID. And I wasn't certainly expecting to switch jobs, but the opportunity was right at the right time. So yes, I feel sort of traitorous though to the BA community because I never wanted to really be a project manager. And actually, when I was recruited for the position, it was as a BA, but then somehow it just took on this life of its own and I ended up as a project manager. So we'll see
Wow.
how it goes. It's pretty funny. But let me get started here. One quick moment. All right, so yes, this journey is about the IIBA's take on product ownership analysis. So there's a couple of reasons that I'll just skip over the intro, but I do have to do the shtick about my last name because it's obviously unique. It's Dutch and it's a link. If it's a link, think, dink, or tink, then they are Dutch and they're probably from Oostburg or Hingham, Wisconsin. But it's spelled Hingham, so that's how we say it. So that is my stolen spiel from my husband, and he gave me that wonderful last name. So yes, I did actually go on this journey to earn the Certificate of Product Ownership Analysis. And knowing that I had this presentation coming up was kind of a really good inspiration for me to dig in and really do it. And so they released the knowledge for this framework back in early 2021, and then they released the actual certificate. I believe it was in August 1st. If you were lucky and you saw the deal and you took it from the IIBA, you could have taken this exam for free, which was a pretty sweet deal. I was telling Randy that I wanted to take that deal. I signed up and paid for the exam on the last day, not realizing I couldn't take the exam on the same day. So I ended up having to pay for it, but it was still a worthwhile journey. So the IIBA came out with this because I think there was a realization that business analysts are often involved now that we have kind of moved into this agile way of working in either supporting a product owner, acting as a product owner proxy, or even moving into the product owner role. Obviously, the Agile Extension to the BABAC has been out for a few years. The AAC is a well-established IIBA credential for the AA or for Agile analysts, but they realize that there's more to it than that when you start getting into product ownership analysis. So this is the framework that they came up with, which is pretty structured. And the impetus behind this is to make sure that you don't fall into the trap listed here, which the biggest risk of product development is to create a great product that nobody wants. So I take no credit for any of the content or the images or anything in this presentation. This is all, pretty much sourced straight from the IIBA's content on this matter. So there are 7 pieces to the framework that they offer, starting with applying foundational concepts, cultivating customer intimacy, engaging the whole team, making an impact, delivering often, learning fast, and obsessing about value. So this is going to be a very quick recap of this framework, which is, it's pretty intense, actually. There's a lot to it, and I did not have enough time to really cover the techniques that are involved, but as you would imagine, there are many additional techniques that product owners use that other analysts may not. I'm happy to put together a list of those after the fact, and I can provide them to your chapter. But there are quite a few, and I mean, I could return at a future date to talk through some of those many techniques. There are a lot. All right, so the first part of the framework is applying foundational concepts. What that really means is trying to set your organization and your team up for success from the beginning, and not waiting until you're well into it to try to figure some of these key things out. So when looking at setting up your organization for success, first you need to realize that there are different potential product roles or disciplines that could be recognized, and some organizations may have 1 or 2 or 3 Other organizations might have one person serving all of these functions. Product managers tend to be the ones doing, the market research, figuring out what products to create. Product owners, as we probably all know, are the ones making the day-to-day decisions about the product, owning the vision for the product. And product marketing is about getting the product out there to sell it, right? To see how customers like it, to get demand for the product. So there are three kind of distinct potential roles, but they could also be done by one or more people. Another thing that you need to do at the beginning to set your organization up for success is to make sure you're aligning your products to your strategy. This one might seem like kind of a no-brainer, but I can't tell you how many times as a consultant where I've gone into a company and seen them doing and building products that did not align back to their, mission and vision or their organizational strategy, which is really shocking. But as business analysts, we should also always be asking, does this tie back to what we're trying to accomplish as an organization? The other part is aligning your artifacts. So if you're familiar with Agile, most of these should seem pretty familiar. One that might look a little bit new is the product market fit. So that would be something more likely a product manager would be doing, going out and figuring out what is the demand out there, what are the needs in the market, and where can we fill those needs. Value proposition is closely, I think, tied to, these other items. Basically, what are your customers going to get out of this product? What is going to make it, popular for them? Why would they choose it? Business model canvas is another artifact that I absolutely love. And if you haven't seen it before, you should definitely check it out. It's basically a one-page document. You can download a free version of it from strategizer.com. And it spells out on one page all the things that, go into making your product and making it successful. Then you've got your product roadmap, which is laying out your, product at a high level, your release plans, which, I'm actually a fan of continuous releasing, DevOps and that kind of thing. But, if you have to save up enough features to make it worth justifying a release, you might have a release plan. And then, of course, you've got your iteration plan or your sprint plan. So these all need to be aligned at the beginning. You don't want to wait until later to figure them out. Okay, the second part of this is setting your own team up for success. So a lot of factors go into this, as you probably know if you've ever worked on a team. You have to consider where people are. Are they geographically dispersed? Are they co-located? Highly unlikely right now, but it's possible. You never know. What type of a company is it? Is it a nonprofit? Is it a government organization? Is it services that they make? Is it the products that they make? How in depth do you have to go there? And what is the life cycle stage? So when you talk about life cycle stage, that's like instead of projects, that have a distinct beginning and an end, products really you think of as, I always think of it like a living creature, right? They are a sparkle in someone's eye. They become a baby, they become a toddler, they become a tween, teenager, so on and so forth until eventually, they retire and are no longer, useful. So you need to consider when you're looking at your products where you're at in that stage. Some might be in the very new stage of inception, sort of greenfield. And that's very different than being a product owner for a product that's been around for a few years that may need a lot less care and feeding. Also, you want to drive your success through analytics. So paying attention to numbers, making sure you know your customer. If any of you are familiar with AX, excuse me just a moment. Did I say AX? I meant UX, user experience. I obviously am a Microsoft partner here. You want to know thy customer. That is the mantra that they say all the time, know thy customer. So you need to intimately understand your customer, engage with them, work with them to figure out what's valuable to them in a product. And really, truly, like come together with them and co-create. That's where you're going to build exactly what they need and not go outside the lines and build things that they don't care about, don't need or want. Products emerge. So that's another key sort of tenet of Agile, right? Is that the best products and architectures emerge. You won't know at the beginning what your product is going to look like for sure. You need to try things, experiment, and see what works. And then, of course, always as a product owner, you're looking to maximize your product value. And value is an interesting thing that could be a whole other presentation unto itself because it's relative to your context, right? So not any one person is going to define value exactly the same way as someone else. What is valuable to me may not be valuable to you. So as the product owner, you need to recognize what value means to you and your organization and keep a very keen eye on it. The last piece in this first foundational set of items is expanding the product owner role. So up until now, the product owner's been seen sort of as, they're just there, they're keeping the backlog groomed, they're, making sure that the product is growing and evolving. But really need to look at them more as like the CEO of the product. They are the number one advocate or the voice of the customer for the customers. They're also in charge of championing the team's work. So as a product owner, you should be the team's number one cheerleader. You want this product to succeed and they can't do it without you and you can't do it without them. Always be envisioning and designing for impact. So constantly iterating, getting that feedback and applying the learnings and assessing for new things that might come out. So as your product emerges, you need to continually look at it and compare it against your strategy, excuse me, and make sure that it aligns. And also, be willing to learn. You're not going to know everything and you have to be comfortable with ambiguity. I know that when I was first introduced to Agile as a business analyst, that was really hard to get over. I was so used to, writing this giant spec, knowing it all up front. But you can't do that as a business analyst who practices Agile or a product owner. You need to realize that things will change and be willing to learn from what you discover. And again, repeat, 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 sharp focus on value. All right, next up in the framework, we have create customer intimacy. So this goes very much along the lines of the last slide, know thy customer. So that's the number one piece right here, know your customer. And then also to apply the learnings from your customers. So in knowing your customer, you want to get personal. They're not just numbers. They're not just, random names that you pick out of the phone book. They are people. You want to understand them, where they're coming from, their perspectives, their context, what interests them, what's going to spark desire in them, that intrigue. You also want to build empathy, and empathy is really truly putting yourself in the other person's shoes and trying to feel what they feel so you can feel their pain. And you can recognize and see ways to resolve that pain. You want to be sincere in that as well and develop trust and safety. And you do that by asking probing, creative, and perceptive questions of your customers. They want to tell you what they think, so listen carefully, understand their concerns, be very sensitive to where they're coming from, and identify with them and what they need. And then once you've heard them, define their problems and make sure that they are aligned to what the customer really wants and needs. Also, you want to observe your customers. So this is a traditional business analysis technique. As we all know, you can be active or passive in observation, but by engaging in observation, you're able to actually see what the customers are doing, how they're using your product, and hearing their direct feedback. This will give you insight into what they really need, because a lot of times they don't even know what they need. I mean, you as the product owner think you know what they need, but they might not even know what they need either. So observing them helps you to figure that out. Also, you want to make sure you build in performance standards. Performance is one of those non-functional requirements that has come back to bite me in the butt professionally. So I'm pretty always in favor of having performance measurements and making sure that those are a part of your analysis. And also make sure that you're going to support your customers with training and development. Don't leave them high and dry to try to figure out things on their own. All right, so that was know thy customer. If you don't remember anything else from tonight, remember know thy customer. It's probably the key. Um, Next, we've got applying customer learnings. So validating what their problems are, and the key questions you want to ask are, is there a problem that's worth solving? Does everybody know what the problem is, and do they understand it? And what things can we do to solve the problem? Those are the key questions that you want to be asking to validate that a problem is a real problem that you need to solve. And then you want to integrate your learnings. And how do you learn things? Questions and answers, hypothesis, experiment. So come up with an idea, try it out, see if it sticks. If it doesn't, try something else. Continuously use those feedback loops to improve and integrate that learning into what you're building. And then you want to evaluate and evolve the product. So if you didn't ask those three questions at the beginning, you might not be building something that is actually needed, right? There might not be a problem that really exists that needs to be solved. You want to make sure that if there are any misunderstandings, you're figuring those out quickly, right? And moving on to the next thing. Um, Try to figure out those insights so that you can use that feedback. Gain a deeper customer understanding. Again, know thy customer inside and out. And then use intelligent learning. So, use your empirical evidence and feed that back into your product development. All right. Third piece of the puzzle is engaging the whole team. I love this because I'm a team player, and it's in my mind, it's win as a team or lose as a team. There's no, I in team. Don't pull out the graphic that has an I that looks like it's in team. It's not really in team. It's not about an individual. It's about succeeding together. And so that means really making sure that you're understanding everyone involved, who the stakeholders are, that you have shared goals, and that people on the team are truly engaged and truly empowered. As a consultant, that's one of the biggest problems I've seen with Agile and product ownership in specific, is that the organizations aren't empowering the product owner to truly be the CEO of their product. They're not letting them make the decisions. They're requiring them to, go up the chain to get approvals, which slows down the process and is quite frankly anti-agile, right? It needs to be the product owner who has the responsibility, and they should be the one making all the decisions, and the decisions should be respected from the CEO to the help desk. Doesn't matter who it is. All right, so the first part of this is sharing goals. So as we as business analysts all know, one of our primary things is to get a shared understanding, right, of anything that we're trying to accomplish. The product owner in specific is required to kind of own the vision. They create the vision. It can be created collaboratively, and it will evolve over time. Shouldn't just be a one and done activity at the beginning of your, formation of your team. You should be looking at your vision regularly, looking at to see if anything has changed in the market, if it still aligns with your organization's strategy, and continue to evolve that over time. It should also motivate and inspire. I like to use the elevator pitch. Can you very succinctly tell someone exactly what it is that you're trying to accomplish? Everyone on the team should be able to give that elevator pitch and know what it means. And you must share it often. So again, not one and done. This is something that needs to be truly evangelized, and that is the product owner's responsibility to make sure that that happens. Collective responsibility is another great one. It's again not a team. It is a team, not an individual, and everyone's voice matters. And you have different parts of the team, and collective responsibility doesn't include just the delivery team. Delivery team is the people actually doing the work, the product owner, the developers, the scrum master or team leader, depending on what framework you're using. There's stakeholders, and I think everyone who's a business analyst knows that anyone who has an interest in what you're doing is a stakeholder, and there are lots of them. There could be endless amounts of stakeholders. So you want to make sure that you understand who those people are. If they're impacted by the product, they're of course a stakeholder. If they're going to support it, they are. And your extended product team, that could be anyone else. That could be, your executives. That could be your other leaders, managers within your organization. But everyone is responsible. No one can, make it or break it by themselves. And then you want to align your product. So make sure that what you're building, it resonates with your customers, that also satisfies the needs of your stakeholders and your organizational strategy. Also align to your competition. You've got to at least stay even, and probably should be staying ahead of your competition if you want to stay in business. So you got to keep an eye on that as well. Also pay attention to outside environmental factors that could be going on. It could be weather, like Kochi, India has had all these storms, and that's been impacting my team at my company, but politics as well. There's so many things that you need to align to. But I would say the top one obviously is your customers, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who buy the product and use it. Next, we have engage and empower. I really like this one because, that to me, giving the true empowerment is the key to success on an agile team. And if a product owner is not empowered and the team is not empowered, they're not going to really be successful. First step of that is obviously psychological safety. So this is, when you go in to do your retrospective, you do a safety check. How's everybody feeling today? You could have them do like a wall of, emojis, like here's how I'm feeling right now about the project, about how things are going. It's really about making sure that people do feel empowered, and that the team trusts each other, and that they build respect, that they give each other appreciation, that they're approachable. Not everyone is. It's sometimes there's certain people with personalities, like you don't want to go talk to them because they're going to bite your head off. That's not a team player. That's not going to be a good fit on your agile team. So, pick people who are willing to listen, to hear feedback. And obviously availability, that's a hard one for a lot of product owners, which is why I see a lot of BAs stepping in to assist product owners in the product ownership job. You also need to analyze your stakeholders. This is, BA 101. This is step number one in almost any project or product, right? You need to figure out who you're doing this for. You've got your internal folks, the owners of the company, the managers, people who work there, but you have all these other external stakeholders as well that you might need to consider. Suppliers, society, government, creditors, shareholders, the list can go on and on. But you just need to make sure that you're conducting that stakeholder analysis. You do it in the beginning, but just like your product vision, you need to be doing this throughout the project, or the product development, because people's opinions can change. They might be for your product one day and against it the next, and you need to keep your pulse on that so you can tell when you need to go make some adjustments to either win their approval back or get them on your side, things like that. And then, of course, engaging stakeholders. And I think this is what we as business analysts do all day, every day, right? We are collaborating, we are communicating, we are, working with all those folks who have an interest in what we're doing, and making sure that their voices are heard and considered when you are developing your product. All right, next is making an impact. It's interesting, when I was studying for this certification, that what is the goal of every organization? The goal of every organization really is to make an impact, right? That is what every single group out there wants to do. They want their product to be meaningful, valuable, useful, helpful. So how do you do that? You delight your customers. You advance your strategy. So delighting customers, again, know thy customer. Repeat that again, make that your mantra. You want to understand who they are, right? So not all customers are the same, and diversity is a wonderful thing. People can be living all over the place, and like this audience, you're from all over the country, all over the world, which is amazing. I love that. And when you're building products, you need to consider where your customers are. Depending on what you're building, you could be building something that's just for your local community, or you could be building something that is for everyone in the world. You also need to think about their demographics. So like, what is their age? Where are they in the, social spectrum? And then psychographic, how do they feel about things, and behavioral. So there's all these different aspects of customers that you need to consider when you're trying to figure out how you're going to delight them. And then it's assessing product market fit. So this was that new concept I brought up at the beginning that is probably new to most of you, but it's really going out and making sure that what you're building is something the market actually wants. Because you might think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, but you bring it out there and you show it to a customer and they might say, no, I would never use this in a million years. So there's different levels you can do that at, right? You could have a whole minimal viable product, which would contain just the very basics to get it out there and start getting feedback. But that would be the concept of like an entire product. Or you could just do one single feature or a single release, excuse me, and of marketable features, marketable releases. Then you also need to define your value proposition. So again, what is the product doing to help the customer solve their pain, solve their problems? What benefits they're going to get from using your product, and how does it stand out against your competitors? So as I said before, you really need to stay at least on par with your competitors, if not way ahead of them, because if you lag behind and your competitors start to build features and things that customers then start to expect, and you don't have them, you're going to quickly lose market share and ultimately go out of business. So advancing your strategy. So you need to have a strategy for your product, right? What are your goals? What are the benefits? Again, what are you going to realize as a result of building this product? Is it, money? Is it recognition? Is it customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction? There's so many things you can do to determine the measure of benefits. And ultimately, you want to demonstrate value. Make sure your product is valuable. You also need to integrate across initiatives. So each product is not necessarily alone in a silo, right? There's probably a lot of things going on at your organization, different strategic initiatives that are happening. So you need to make sure that your product is in alignment with the other things going on. So that means, keeping an eye on what's happening within your organization, and if your product should come out of alignment, then you need to get either back on track or cancel it altogether. And then we've got cultivating organizational support. So this has to do a little bit, I think, with change management, because everybody knows change can be difficult. But gaining, support for your product means you need to socialize that you're doing it, right? Let people know, have a proactive plan about communicating it, make sure that you're managing any, risks or assumptions, and bringing that work together, really harmonizing things, which is the IIBA's favorite word this year. All right, next in the framework, we have deliver often. So I think this is a key, again, another key tenet of Agile. You don't want to, go spend 6 months gathering requirements like I actually used to do, and then throwing it all over the wall to your developers, and they go off and spend a year building it, and you've moved on to something else. So you've completely forgotten everything that was required in the first place. Those are the old days, and you wouldn't get anything delivered until like a year and a half later, and inevitably what's delivered isn't what's needed. Everything has changed by then: business conditions, market conditions, customer needs, business models. So many things could change. So we want to do away with that slow paced delivery and deliver often. So how do we do that? We plan delivery. So part of that as a product owner is to make sure you're, managing that product backlog. That backlog is the single source of requirements for what you're trying to build, and it's built on your product strategy. And it includes all the work that needs to be done. It's never static, or never static. Yes, it's dynamic. It's constantly evolving, changing, growing. You can add things, delete things as you learn new information. That's what the feedback loops are for. It should be prioritized, estimated, and sorted so that it's ready each time the delivery team goes into iteration or sprint planning. And another thing it needs to do is articulate the value. So this is, again, a tricky one. Value could be its whole other topic, so I'm not going to go into the weeds on that one, but you need to understand why each item you're building is important. For me, that comes into play with, if you're using a user story format, it's some kind of user, I want this thing so that I can do this. So it's the why. It's the last part of that that's unfortunately often neglected and left out of user stories. So if you do that, maybe you should change your habit. And that gives the context to the developers who are building it so that they know that what they're doing is valuable and the value that it provides. MVP, so minimal viable product builds. You want to get the smallest, most cost-effective version out there that helps you put it in the hands of the users and start gathering that feedback. The feedback is what should drive everything that you do. You can use that feedback and build a better product. Also, you can use MVP to test things, right? Try something out, see if it works. If it doesn't, great, you only lost a couple weeks. You only lost a little bit of money. You can go back to the drawing board and try something else. Make sure that you're including, all the pieces of that though, right? So you need to have technical support, market demand, it might be a regulatory thing driving it, anything else that is involved, but use that MVP concept to, figure out what's really desired, and then you can build on it after you've validated it. So planning releases, again, I'm not a fan of, waiting 3 months to release something. My last project team, they used to release at the end of each sprint, and I was a scrum master on that project. I'm like, well, why are you waiting? Why are you waiting to release this? Can't you just release it when it's ready? And they're like, well, I guess we could, and it's like, the sooner you can get it into the hands of your people to use it, the better. So they moved from a model where they were saving up a bunch of work and then, doing a release at the end of each sprint, which actually caused a lot of overhead, a lot of extra testing. The smaller a release can be, the easier it is to validate and to, get out there. So they ended up doing multiple releases per day by the time I left the team, which is awesome. But if you are doing a bigger project, you might need to still do release planning, plan out chunks of features based on themes or epics or whatever. Make sure you have, the planning of those, and it's at a high level, right? It's never going to be super detailed, but at least you have a plan, and that's the key, is to have a plan, even though plans never actually go to plan in my experience. All right, then delivering. We want to deliver our products. So how do we do that? Obviously, iteration planning. I think most of us, if you're an Agile practitioner, know what this is. You go into your plan, you pick what you're going to do, you figure out how you're going to deliver it, and then make a commitment that you're going to get it done together as a team. Then you go do it, right? You build each of those small, independent, negotiable, valuable items. Yes, I'm using the INVEST acronym right there. And then you're adapting as you learn, continuously iterating, evolving in increments. And of course, the product owner should be there constantly providing support. And my favorite is that quality should be baked in. And unfortunately, as a consultant, I've also seen people skimp on quality. They don't build it in as part of their plan, and they leave it just like waterfall till the very end, and then they end up having the same issues that, we used to have in the olden days. So build quality in, don't wait till the end. Every user story should have acceptance criteria that can be turned into a test case or used as a test case to make sure that your quality is happening on every story and that it doesn't get to a done state until it meets that quality criteria. Also validation. So you still want to have the product owner accept each item. They'll see it in your sprint review, hopefully sooner, right? And then having users actually go out and test it, and having them actually, put it in their own hands. They are more willing to give feedback about it. And again, that validated learning helps you create a better product. How am I doing on time? All right, I'm okay. All right, learn fast. Learn fast, not learn slow, learn fast. So the tortoise and the hare here, we want to take those feedback loops, make them as short as possible, right? So we can learn as quickly as possible. We also want to make sure we're measuring what matters. There's a lot of metrics out there in Agile that don't really matter that much, like velocity, which I will not talk about more right now. If you want to ask me about it later, that's fine. It's often misused is what I'll say. And then once you've delivered it, take that feedback and apply it. All right, so what does matter when it comes to measurements? And measurements can be tricky because once you put a measurement out there, people tend to change their behavior to, I don't know, to make things look better than they are potentially. They change their behavior to impress. I don't know all the motivations, but it is just a fact that people change their behavior when you start measuring them on anything. So you need to measure the strategy itself, the product itself, and also delivery, right? So strategy is, how much lifetime revenue are we getting from this product? What's our market share? How much is our margin? What's the average order value, et cetera. So those are, financial measures for the most part that are pretty easy to measure and not easy to game. So they're very objective measures, which really helps drive good decision making. When you come to measuring the product, it gets a little more subjective. So Net Promoter Score is also known as NPS, is a customer sentiment tool that many organizations use to gauge how people feel about their products and their organization. You could also have some financial measures here too. So like customer acquisition cost, how much does it cost to get a customer, to keep the customer, how many customers leave, how happy they are, and how difficult things are for them. And then of course the delivery. So this is your team's performance. And this is where I often see things get misused, unfortunately. But some of them are very valuable tools. Burn down charts, velocity, cycle time and lead time, those are more like value stream kinds of metrics, or Kanban would be a good use for them. Same thing with throughput. Also things like escaped defects. So that quality being baked in, if you're finding a lot of escaped defects, ones that make it through somehow into production, that's a sign something didn't go well. And then, how many defects are there? Are there a lot? How severe are they, et cetera? So measure what matters. And then you also want to assess what was delivered. So you do this in the same kind of way. You want to assess the strategy, is it meeting the measures of the three things we just talked about? And look at the market too. Is the product in line with the market? Are there other things you could try that haven't been tried before? Things like that. And also assessing your delivery. So did you deliver on time? I think with Agile, you should always be delivering something. You might not deliver everything, but the schedule is more or less fixed, as is generally the cost. Quality has got to be baked in, as I said, and make sure you're getting value from each delivery that happens. All right, this is the last one that is a very important one as well. So obsess, 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 obsess about value. So again, value is something that is going to be different to everyone in their own context. And defining what that is to your product as a product owner or someone who supports a product owner is, is key. How will you know if you're gaining value if you don't know what value means to you? So in obsessing about value, you want to continuously evolve your product. Don't build it once, throw it out into the world and say, I'm done, product is released, I'm moving on. Again, going back to that product life cycle, every product has a life cycle. And if you don't continuously evolve your product, it is quickly going to become irrelevant. The market will reject it, they won't want it anymore. The next new shiny thing will come along and they will no longer want to use your product, they will flush it. So you need to be continuously looking at your product to see what you can do to make it better and more valuable for your customers. And then optimizing your value delivery. Excuse me. All right, so to evolve the product, strategy, everything comes back to strategy over and over and over and over again, right? So how is your product doing? How much does it cost? Is it generating revenue? What's your market share? How's the competition doing? The most interesting one to me on this is business model changes. So I once had a client that was an insurance company, a very large, well-recognized insurance company. And, they tended to be very slow moving as an organization. I was actually there to help bring about an agile transformation. And in that organization, there were a lot of competitors starting to come into the insurance industry with very innovative insurance models, business models that were completely different from traditional, right? Like, oh, you want to have a boat and you want to use it just on the weekends? Well, we can insure it just for the days you're actually going to use it, right? We don't care when it's sitting in the garage. Like, just really kind of new ways of thinking about things. And that's happening continuously, especially for older established companies. They're getting digitally disrupted practically on a daily basis. So as a product owner, it's so key to be continuously watching the market to see what's going on out there. Or you could see an industry and maybe you want to become your own CEO of your own company. You could see, oh gosh, this door manufacturing company over here, they have this software that they use that this one company makes, and everyone in the industry uses it, and it's horrible. Like, you could see that as an opportunity, and that was a real example, by the way. To say I could make a better product and I could take over, right? So this is happening a lot lately. So again, market alignment, look at your competition, other products, everything else that's going out there in the world, keeping an eye on trends. Again, those business models that can be hugely disruptive. And of course, always be assessing, the financial viability. Is your price point a good one? Will people actually buy it for what you want to make on it? Are you going to get a return on your investment, or was it just a bunch of thrown away money and you're going to lose money? Are you meeting your targets? Are you managing your development and implementation costs? So those are all things to consider when you're evolving your product. Then we've got optimizing value delivery. So you want to assess capabilities, and the capabilities could be your culture. And I've been a consultant for about 8 years now, and I've seen cultures on, total opposite sides of the spectrum. Some that are so rigid, so traditional, command and control, and others that are so innovative and so fast moving, that they can do things very nimbly, very, very quickly. Where you live, the country you live in could impact things as well. The people. So I hate the term human resources. I just like people, skilled and talented people. But the people that you have to do the work, if they're not capable of doing the work, you've got to find someone else. And as we all know, the job market for anyone, especially in technology, is as hot as it's ever been. It's almost impossible to find people. But people at the same time are fleeing their old employers for a variety of reasons. So it's also a good time to try to find people. But either way, get the skills that you need. Make sure your brand is valuable, that it's recognized. Choose your ways of working carefully. So the word here is from the book from the IIBA, but I prefer not to use the word methodologies very often. I think it's too rigid. I like frameworks better. They're a little more flexible, less prescriptive, but also people's knowledge, like what's in their head. Then you want to optimize your process. So this is part of being agile. You are constantly, doing retrospectives. You're looking at how to improve yourself and your team. How you work together. All sorts of things that you can improve on every time you have a retro. And so streamline those as much as you can. If it's not working, try something else. Try, putting some parameters on things so that you can have some gates. Sometimes those are necessary, but get it down so that it's a smooth, well-oiled machine, and you will be good to go. And then lastly, leveraging technology. Technology is a wonderful thing. I cannot even imagine trying to do analysis on anything 30 years ago without, the technology that we have today. It's a wealth of information. Taking your data, your raw data, turning it into information, and then gleaning insights that you can take action on. So important, and a lot of organizations struggle mightily with that. That is something that a lot of companies have, strategic initiatives on right now. It's a really hot area of my business and my previous business as well. Building out, enterprise data warehouses and all sorts of, predictive and AI, machine learning, all those kinds of things. So use the tools. They're there. They're not rocket science. They can be done. Use that information to drive your decision making, and you will come out with a much better product. But make them visible as well. So, executives love to see their pretty dashboards. Use those measures that we were talking about earlier and actually use them to make changes and improvements in what you're doing. And that is the framework, the product ownership analysis framework. I know that was a ton of information in a short amount of time. I did study for several months to earn the certification for this. If anyone's interested in that certification, I would say it's not as rigorous as like the AAC or the CBAP, and it definitely opens your eyes to all of these other, things that you can do to support your product owner, or as a product owner proxy, or as a product owner yourself. So thank you for listening, and I will now open it up to any questions that you might have.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Rachel. That was
a lot. I know. It's a ton of information. I will be happy to share this too, the slide deck.
Oh, thank you so much. That was one of our questions too. And yeah, it was a lot, but it's a lot to process, a lot of valuable information. So I'm pretty sure I can speak for everybody. It was really good.
Oh, thank you.
I'm glad it was, I'm happy that it was thorough like that, because you kind of just can process it.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have a question. Our first question is from Deborah, and she wanted to know if you have any examples of performance standards.
Okay, so performance, you can look at it in a couple different ways. One is like performance of people or performance of systems. Performance of systems is where I got my butt kicked back when I was a younger BA. So this was back before I was super aware of non-functional requirements. And I had these beautiful user stories and acceptance criteria for this mobile app that we were building. And well, let's see, we went to test it. Technically speaking, it met all of the acceptance criteria, but it was slow as molasses. That was never going to fly on a mobile application. So I missed that requirement. I missed that it had to be performant. That it needed to, with mobile, there is no like downtime. You cannot ask people to wait on mobile. So huge miss on my part, big mistake that I learned early on in my career. The other performance is, people. Looking at, you can look at velocity. Again, that's highly misused in many organizations. It's really just for the team, and it's a forecasting tool. It is not used to measure people performance like at all. It shouldn't be, at least in my opinion. I hope that helped a little bit.
Yeah, awesome. Suzanne actually has a question, wanting to get some clarity on the different roles. And Suzanne, please feel free to interject if I get this wrong. But she was saying, just as a business analyst, her role is crossing over to product owner. And so she's wanting to, while she understands what a product manager is, she wanted to get clarity on the difference between the two. And I think she also said, while the product owner supports the defined vision and guides the delivery team to meet the outlined business goals, her understanding of business or product owner is supporting the vision and guiding the delivery team to meet the outlined business goals. So she wanted to just understand the difference.
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting question. I actually watched a webinar by Dave West, who is the president of scrum.org. Gosh, it's probably been about a year now, but he addressed this topic. And if you could go back and listen to his webinar, it was amazing. He basically described that in his mind, the product manager is the same thing as the product owner. They just changed the name of it to change sort of the connotation of it, which is not entirely true. I do think, especially according to the IIBA, there are distinct differences. The product manager's like way higher level, right? They're working on probably a program, even not necessarily just, your product. And they're the ones doing the research. They're the ones, making sure there's market demand. They're the ones probably writing the business case. So they're pretty far removed from like the day-to-day of product development. But they're an important role if your organization has that as a separate role. But most organizations don't. Like, they just don't have the budget. So they'll very often ask a product owner to function in both of those ways. But there's a lot more detail in the free product owner analysis guide from the IIBA online if you would like additional details.
Awesome. And I did she did clarify also, she had a follow-up question on, what what's recommended to a business analyst whose role is becoming a hybrid role of both a BA and a product owner?
Yeah, I would say number one, go out and read the product owner guide that the IIBA has published that this just covered. Like, this is kind of a playbook for a product owner. I've always thought of a business analyst or a product owner as like a business analyst on steroids. So I think all the underlying skills that a BA has are still extremely useful and relevant and could be applied. But this gives you a whole other viewpoint and tool set to use to create the best product that you can.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Joshua would like to know what collaboration software you use.
That's a great question. Right now, unfortunately, the client I'm working for is involved with the government, so very few. But on my last job, I loved using Miro. Miro is very flexible. It's easy to use. You can use it for pretty much any type of collaboration that you want to do. I used it for COVID, like doing all my retrospectives. It's very visual. It's very fun. I like to keep my retrospectives, not boring. So I do a different activity every single time. I've actually curated a list of like over 300 different retrospective activities. So, I think I'm going to publish that someday. But yeah, I use Miro. That's probably my number one. And then, of course, your standard corporate tools, Slack or Teams, they're okay, but they're not quite as flexible, I guess I would say. That's a great question.
It is. Right. Oh, and Laura said she'd love to see that list of retrospective activities. That actually was one of the questions on my list.
Yeah, I actually have put it into a database, and I'm gonna probably turning it into an application that I put on my website. I have a blog, and I in a former life I was a web publisher, front end web developer, so I've got the skills to do it. It's just a matter of time, but I can certainly share that out as a PDF if y'all promise not to share it with anybody else.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. I would love that.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that.
Awesome. Danette has a question. Do you consider the product strategy to be the epic?
That's an interesting question. Probably not. And in fact, so the scrum.org or Scrum guide was updated in 2020 as well. I don't know if all of you are aware of that, but they introduced a new concept called the product goal. So similar to the sprint goal, but the product goal overarches the entire product. And I would consider that to be your product strategy, your North Star. And then epics are just the really big ideas that make up that product. That's how I would look at it.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes sense. Yvonne has a question on what was the name of the YouTube channel that you mentioned?
Did I mention
Or the
YouTube channel?
The YouTube. And maybe it's the Martin. Is that what you dropped in? It probably is.
The what? I'm confused. I missed something.
I don't know.
I don't remember mentioning YouTube.
Okay, well,
That's okay.
That's okay. I think Martin might have added a video in there, so it might be that.
Okay.
That you referenced. Aura has a question on what is your advice and pointers for people wanting to take the IIBA POA?
I would say first, before you want to do that, you need to become familiar with the Agile Extension version 2. A lot of that ties in very directly with the CPOA. In fact, if I were someone interested in this, I would study for them both at almost at the same time. Study for the AAC first, get those foundational concepts of the planning horizons and all those things, and that ties in extremely well. And this builds basically on top of that Agile extension, specifically towards product ownership. I have a blog. I just wrote a blog about that. It's on my website, which is right there. It's just my name.com, and my name is spelled AEL instead of EL like other Rachel's. So there is a blog there you can read specifically about both the AAC and the CPOA and several other certifications if you're interested. But it's not that, I would say, It's definitely not as difficult as the CBAP or even the AAC, but I think if you can do the AAC and do the CPOA studies kind of in parallel, I think you could pass them both very quickly.
Awesome. Well, I have one more question. I won't keep
This
you.
is awesome. I love questions.
Joyce says that she's working with teams that don't have an interest in making doing agile work, and there's been no top-down cultural push to embed it into ways of working outside of lip service.
Yeah.
And so she wants to know what your suggestion is. If you have a suggestion to try to successfully implement agile in that environment, or do you think it's a lost cause?
I think it's very difficult. Not that it can't be done. You just start doing it. You start modeling it. You start being successful with it, and it could catch on like wildfire. However, your best bet is to get top-down support. That is the best way to make it happen. Grassroots efforts to make those sorts of big changes, usually don't work out very well in my experience, unfortunately. But if you want more tips on agile transformation, I have an ebook that has been published by my last company, Core BTS. You can find it on their website. It's called 40 Agile Transformation Pain Points and How to Avoid or Manage Them. And that is lessons learned from me the hard way.
That's excellent.
Yeah, it's actually, I got a really nice review from, now I'm not going to remember the guy's name. Jeff Patton, the guy who created the user story map method.
Okay.
He actually commented on it and said it was a nice little list. So
that's impressive.
Yeah, I was like, whoa, there's a star, and he just like said something positive about my little ebook. So yeah, it's available for download. Again, the company is Core BTS, and just search for Agile Transformation Pain and you'll find it.
Yeah, Joe actually dropped that in the thread. So thank you, Joe, for doing that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I know I said that was the last question. We actually have one more, and just wondering.
No problem.
Do you think studying for the AAC is easier than POA, or which one do you think is?
Actually, that's a great question, because with the CPOA, the IIBA actually published a whole set of online learning materials that go along with it, which they haven't done for any other certification except for maybe the data one, which, and it's a new product basically that they're selling, right? So you can buy it as a bundle, or you can buy it with the exam. I would say, that gives you an advantage that you don't have, because there's nothing like that for the AAC. The AAC is kind of all on you. I like to use a website called cram.com, and I create my own set of questions and answers. You can upload them like from a Google worksheet or a doc, or copy and paste. And it's really great because you can make, all sorts of different kinds of tests that you can test yourself on. You can use other people's. So a lot of people make theirs public. I think I made mine private, but I'd be happy to change it now that I've passed the exam. And I mean, it's just really great. Repetition, read the book, go along and do these drills, do them a couple times a day. Over time, it just sort of sinks in, and it makes it a lot easier to feel confident going into taking the exam. But I would say, AAC is going to be harder. I think it's newer in concept. If you are not super familiar, like with the Agile Extension version 2, that's kind of the basis of that test. And it's really about the knowledge. It's not necessarily about your experiences. And you know this, Randy, right? You took it. I think it's more about, the knowledge in the book than it is actually being a practitioner. That's my opinion.
For sure.
So great questions. This has been awesome. You guys are awesome, even though I couldn't see you. I hope this was enjoyable, useful, valuable information.
It really was. Thank you so much for coming and speaking